All right, welcome back to the Embracing Change Room. Our next presenter will be Jeff Ferguson. Give you a little bit about him. Jeff Ferguson is a passionate growth marketer and digital educator who has led the online marketing efforts for companies such as Hilton Hotels, Kimberly-Clark, Interactive Corp, Experian, and Napster. His current role is head of Amplitude Digital. He has worked with renowned brands such as Belkin, Billabong, CBS, eHarmony, Just Fab, Manchester United, Paychex, PetSmart, Popcornopolis, the Smithsonian, Stila Cosmetics, Thrive Market, Sony, and many more. Honored as one of PPC Hero's top 25 most influential PPC experts for 3 years in a row, Jeff Ferguson is a regular presenter at AdTech, Facebook Expo, Consumer Electronics Show, Convention Conference, Digital Hollywood, eMetrics, Online Marketing Summit, PubCon, Search Market Expo, and State of Search. He's been both a speaker and board member at Search Engine Strategies. Jeff has been a columnist for various publications, including Search Engine Land and Search Engine Journal, when his legendary data research projects have tipped many sacred cows of SEO and paid media advertising malpractice. As an instructor for UCLA, Jeff teaches advanced digital marketing classes and designed the school's first ever course on search engine optimization. Put your hands together for Jeff Ferguson.
Thanks so much. Thanks for coming. I know the lure of a title with AI in it is just drawing everybody over, but I appreciate this. We actually will talk a little bit about AI today, but happy to be back. I actually love Dallas. I'm one of those rare, born and raised in California kind of people that you never hear about that. Most people just go there, whatever. And but I actually do have some Dallas and Texas backgrounds. A lot of my mother's side of the family actually was from various areas around Texas and things like that. So it feels like home, and enough that whenever I come here, subconsciously I always seem to book a hotel that's like right next to the Waffle House. Like I just like, oh, okay, I know where I am. It's just the way it was. Yeah. So it was everyone. That's fine. So today we're going to be talking about the end of enterprise SEO, and I know it's very common for there you go. So it's one of the things where like it is very popular to always do these kind of like clickbait type articles where it says it's the end of SEO and this and SEO is dying and all kinds of things. And now that we've got all the new AI stuff and everything like that's kind of come up again. That we're like, oh, this is bound to die, and to the point to where they say even search engines are going to die because of this kind of stuff. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that today, on how that actually is going to work and whether or not it's going to happen at all and those types of things. But before we go into that too much, I may be asking like, who's this guy? Actually, every time I see this picture, I go, who is that guy? Because I don't look like that guy anymore. The pandemic was hard on us all in different ways, but in addition to that very great opening I got in there, I'm technically like one of the old men of the business at this point. I've started in 1995, and I have done large scale SEO programs for some really large companies like Manchester United and the Smithsonian and Sony Pictures Television and just numerous companies, Hilton Hotels, things like that. And before I started my own agency, I was on the enterprise side. I worked for some really massive companies like Hilton Hotels and Kimberly-Clark and what have you. And, was basically doing enterprise SEO before they were really even calling it that. Just like I always kind of say, I was doing SEO before SEO was a thing, before it actually had the formal name of SEO. We were just out there doing our best just to kind of get in every nook and cranny of the internet and what we used to call organic marketing or a bunch of other things. So I've been there, I've been around on this kind of stuff, and I've seen a lot of transitions over this 25 plus years that I've been through. I've seen a lot of major changes, a lot of things that are happening. And so I always kind of bring up the fact that I'm coming at this today from that standpoint where like I've seen some shit. I've seen these things before, and I can kind of calm us down a little bit and say, hey, look, for all the talk that's happening these days about change and things like that. It's not always as dramatic as you think, but there are some stuff going on that I definitely wanted to talk about. This is my little agency out of LA. We've been around since 2004. I've actually joined it a little bit later thanks to a merger of another company that had started, but we've been kicking around for that. We've usually got anywhere between 20 and 30 people kicking around all over the country. these days, just because after the pandemic, everybody kind of spread out, and I didn't really want them to all come home and stick in one place, but they do occasionally. We're a Google Premier partner when we do paid search and things like that. And we're big on animals things. We actually like to give back to the animal community. We do a lot of rescue work. We've actually worked with some charities like PetSmart Charities as their agency over the years and things like that, just to kind of help them out on a pro bono basis. So we're big on dogs. I'm a dog owner myself. So we're very performance driven as well. As they mentioned, we worked with some really fun, amazing, cool clients over the years. I mentioned the SEO ones, like Manchester United and whatnot. But we've seemed to have touched every type of category over the years and really gotten a good understanding of kind of how things work with the consumer journey across the internet and those touch points and how they work together, and especially where search really kind of fills into it. So anyway, enough about me, enough about the agency. So always the big question is kind of like, what's going to kill SEO? What's the thing that's going to finally kill us off after all this time and comes together? And there's some new ones that are kind of on the front that I wanted to talk about. The big one these days that everybody's really talking about a lot is artificial intelligence. It's here. You've probably seen a lot of the fun things that people are doing with AI and ChatGPT and Bard as far as generating terms and playing with certain things. And now that we're getting a good view of what the search generative experience kind of looks like on Google, it's a real big question of because are they really going to even need us anymore? You've got terrible articles like what was that on The Verge that Beta said that we were destroying the internet. We're the reason that destroyed the internet and everything like that. And I've been to those parties. And by the way, that party, I always thought that was really funny. That article basically went to an affiliate conference and then blamed SEO for killing the internet. And I go, it wasn't our fault, man. But anyway, so the thing I have to say about AI and where we're at now and where the levels that we're seeing and based on everything is it's actually was summed up pretty nice in this great article that came out, where basically the AI just isn't good enough. Right? It isn't good enough yet. It's fun. It's a great toy. I use it for a lot for research. I use it for some other work. I'm a writer at my core, so I don't necessarily have it write things for me, but it's got some neat tricks as far as helping you solve getting around that blank page problem and stuff like that. So there's nice things like that, but it's funny. The trouble is let's put too fine a point on it. Conjuration AI is mostly crap. It's one of the things where the good point this article makes is kind of if our bar is that it can write slightly better than humans, that's not much of a bar, because most writers that you see these days, they're really not that good to start with. I hate to say that, but it's just kind of the state of things is that we're not all born to be writers. We're not that way, and one of the problems, especially with SEOs that try and be writers, they're not the best writers to start with, right? So the fact that we can be slightly better than that level of content, that's as much it's not much to worry about, right? In reality, we'd be better off hiring some really good writers and then teaching them how to do the SEO principles the other way around, which I'll talk a little bit about later. So I'm not worried about that one too much. Meanwhile, what's really happening behind the scenes when it comes to AI and things like that is it gets a lot wrong. There's so many things that's getting wrong. So things that are basic for a fifth grader kind of level to it. And plus there's also apparently there's Bard has really got a little frustrated, bewildered shadow workforce that's really kind of feeding that engine behind the scenes. And it's going to take some time before that really ramps up as well. So the fact that it's going to be, this instantaneous, the robots in here and your jobs are all just instantly puffed away, whatever it is, it probably isn't going to happen, right? I don't see that really can happen. What may happen, though, is the idea that we're really, going to be able to use this as a tool for our own growth. We're able to do things. And in reality, the only SEOs that kind of die because of artificial intelligence are the ones that didn't embrace it and actually learn how to use it as part of their jobs, right? So let's get rid of that one. The other one that comes up a lot is this concept of the non-traditional search engines, right? So you've got a bunch of them that are out there. We spend our days worrying about what Google and Bing and some of the other ones are actually doing every day. But in reality, not so secretly and not so suddenly, other things that are actually very search-driven have been increasing behind the scenes, right? And we hear articles like this where 51% of Gen Z women prefer TikTok instead of Google for search. And that one's actually been slowly growing up over time. If you've really paid attention, this one wasn't much of a shock to me, because I know in reality here in the United States, the number 2 search engine is really YouTube, right? So the idea that video search, it being more popular than a standard search, isn't really much of a jump, right, as far as things go. And, we've been seeing this for years. We've been seeing this kind of stuff to it. They're wondering if TikTok and YouTube are the new Googles for Generation Z, if this is going to be the real thing to it. And my thing about these types of things is, again, somebody that's been through all of this, who's seen these things come into the scene, search engines come and go, seen, different things ebb and flow over the years, is the idea that it's probably not going to be the thing that kills it. In reality, it's more about you as the SEO realizing that this is part of your job, right? This is a search engine, right? So don't get so caught up in the idea of my job is just about Google or just about Bing. It's the idea that this technology, if it's got a search function in it, you should probably be involved in that conversation somehow, because it's being used for search. And even though you may not necessarily be optimizing a website, it's part of the consumer journey that's being used by clients today. It's just like in the same sense that usually for consideration in the consumer journey, you're not always optimizing your own website. You're making sure and working with other websites that would be that step. This is one of them, right? TikTok and Google and YouTube and everything like that are going to be part of that step. And so you have to make sure you really kind of expand out on what you touch. So is it going to kill the SEO? Not if they're smart and actually start to use this stuff on their own and include it in their work set, right? So maybe SEO won't die, right? So maybe that's not the thing. Maybe the thing, though, that we have to kind of worry about is, and actually more to that point, is this is a fun little article that was up on Search Engine Land or Journal, one of the two, right? Basically talking about the idea that, Google keeps saying, we really haven't changed things in a couple of decades, right? What we actually say is good advice is still good advice. This is still the way to work it. So, again, that concept of SEO dying and SEO change, it probably won't. However, maybe it is the SEO, right, is the one that is actually on the chopping block here. That's the one that's maybe not long for this earth. And that's what I mean by that is the idea is not search engine optimization is a task, is a set of skills and things like that, but more along the line, the person who calls themselves the search engine optimizer, right? The person that has that role. And I've said this for years now as something where, in the same sense that this type of change is bound to happen, right? That type of evolution is bound to happen in the industry. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's not going to be instantaneous. One day we all wake up and we don't have jobs anymore, or anything along those lines. But it's more along the lines is it's just bound to happen. So before you panic and realize this thing's all going to dry up in an instant or this, it's more along the lines of what SEO is going to happen, what it's going to really happen within inside of organizations. Is that, especially in the enterprise level, you're going to see this role evolve, right? It's really going to transform over the time. So let me explain that a little bit. So has anybody ever watched the show Mad Men? A couple of them like that. So if you haven't, it's a good show. It's a good, supposedly about the golden age of advertising, specifically around the kind of the late 50s, early 60s. They actually get into the 70s at one point. But it was in an era where the really big, large-scale agencies really kind of dominated the business, kind of a little bit like now, but in a little different way. But it was just a much different time. And at that point, television was kind of like the newer medium that was really taking on advertising. So you imagine if an age where instead of the internet being the big shiny object, it was television commercials and television buying and stuff like that. And in that show, there's a Mad Men character named Harry Crane, who, by the way, lives about 3 blocks away from me in Burbank, and we've actually played D&D with him before. He's actually a really nice guy actor-wise. So, but as far as this character goes, he is actually was in charge of what was this newly formed television department inside of their advertising agency that's on the show, and that was just a new role, if you can imagine it, right? A brand new role that was just about handling television and advertising, right? And eventually, in these days, if you go into a modern advertising agency, that type of role, that specialized role that just deals in television, is gone, right? If you're a modern day media buyer in a large or advertising agency, or in just anything, or even when you go to train one in school like I did, you will come out and you're expected to know how to media plan for all of the media, right? Just all the things that exist on there, including digital these days, right? But the idea that, hey, look, I'm going to go out and specialize just in television advertising, that role is dead. It's just gone, right? And what I kind of see that same thing happen is the same role would be the digital media expert, and that's the next one to go, if you right? And we'll stop having this idea of like, this is the digital marketer, the digital advertiser, the digital media expert, to the point to where it'll just be a marketer who knows how to use digital tools. It'll just be an advertiser that knows how to digital tools, whatever. Because I mean, I'm actually amazed that we've made it this far where we can still put digital in front of our tenants, because it's been over 25 years, right? 1995 was the good shut off for this kind of thing. And I expected it to happen any moment, but we're still kind of holding on, right? We're still making it work behind the scenes. But in reality, it's only a matter of time before they kind of give up on that one and you're just a marketer, right? You're just whatever. And I think the same thing is going to happen with SEO. And how do I know this, right? So besides the fact that I've actually helped big companies like this go through that transformation, right, where they no longer have an SEO role inside of that company, they've actually just got people inside the organization that just know how to do the task of SEO on their own, right? As I mentioned, and as was mentioned at the beginning, I teach at UCLA, so I'm actually teaching the next generation of kids how to exist in this kind of world where they're not necessarily the SEO in the organization. They are part of the organization and they know these SEO skills so they can actually do this job in the modern world, right? So the point is that the need for the skill remains, right? But that specialized role will become extinct, like the do-do here. So, and when will that happen? How will that happen? What it is? It's a little different. It's a little hard to kind of pin down exactly how this big transformation, but here's kind of how I think it goes, right? If you think about SEO these modern days, right, and the way that we teach it and the way that we handle it at the agency, is that there's really kind of three big areas of SEO, right? There's the concept of the assets, which is anything like your content. It could be video, it could be any piece of your website that is designed to be read or engaged with by the public, right? Then there's the architecture, basically the website itself, how it's put together, all the different pieces of the puzzle that go along with that. And then authority, and that's basically your inbound links, right? Those three big areas are kind of like a way to kind of get your mind around it. And we do it this way because I've never really had much use for things like off-page SEO or on-page SEO or technical SEO, whatever it is, because it all kind of gets jumbled up. It all gets mixed together. It never really made a lot of sense to it. But if you kind of approach it from this way, suddenly the roles within the organization get a lot clearer, right? You just know that when it comes to assets, you've got people that are content creators, and that's their job, and that's the ones that are responsible for that. You've got architecture, you've got people that are your web devs, your engineers, people that are actually building the website, and they know their role inside of this organization. And when it comes to authority, I've always said the best link builders you'll ever see in your life are the publicists, the members of the PR team within an organization. I will take a link that is generated by a PR expert. I'll take one of those over 100 or 1,000 links that are generated by a so-called link builder, right, within the organization, right? So that's kind of the way it works. And what's funny is these days, if you are an SEO at the enterprise level, where it is, your role is just really kind of become you just going around and begging for resources, right? It's kind of like, because hey, can I do this? Will you do this? When can you get me in the slot? When's the next time you can get this kind of stuff? Oh, September is fine. Don't worry about it. I'll just be over here, right? And it's something where you're really not taking that seriously. You're seen as this kind of ancillary thing. When in reality, and you know it if you've done SEO for any part of times, especially at the enterprise level, is the things you're doing really raises all boats. Right? Some of the best advice I actually give SEOs when they're in school is to say, this actually isn't for SEO, this is for everything, right? This is just going to make everything better. The whole website's going to get faster. The whole website should be mobile friendly. This content is just for everything. It's not just for the SEO side of things, whatever. It's really just the way it works. And usually that change alone will actually get you a lot more resource time from the division. But in reality, it feels like the current SEOs at the enterprise level are more like project managers, right? They've got the SEO skills, they know how to do these things, and maybe they know how to work the tools, but they're really just project managers. They're really just trying to tick some boxes off to make sure that their stuff gets done more than anything else. The actual SEO work is done by others. So what I think is going to happen, and what I'm trying to make happen over here, is this idea that the copywriter's role will evolve, right? And going from the idea of hey, look, we're not trying to get you to write for SEO or write for search engines. We're trying to get you to write for users that use search engines, right? It's a very subtle difference in the language, right? But it's the idea that, hey, look, I was trained as a writer originally when I was in college, and the way it works. And one of the first things that's thrown at us is the idea is that you should write right for your audience, right? You should learn everything about them. You learn what makes them tick, what they want to, especially if you're a copywriter, because you just know how that target audience goes. It's important to understand these days that the target audience for a lot of the work that's on the website are people that use search engines, right? In addition to everything else that you need to know about them, right? So that kind of evolution just needs to kick in, and they need to stop thinking about the idea of like, hey, look, I'm going to write everything I need for this target audience as it is, right? And then some other SEO will come in and sprinkle dust on it and make it better, right? It's like, I think those are the days are going to dry up. Instead, basically, if you're working with an organization that has a website and you're creating content for it, you just need to know how those things tick, right? Because it's part of your job, right? Same thing with the developer. This one, I'm amazed this isn't like fully kicked in, right? Like, why on earth do so many web developers not know all the rules of SEO already when they're developing web pages that we still have to come in and fix their shit? Like, why? Like, why is it? It's 2023. Like, it's going to be 2024 in a couple of months here, and like you're still going like, you don't know how that works. Why did you do something that like replicates? Now we've got 50 title tags on a page. Why did you let that mistake happen? You should know how these things work. And it's just one of the things where at the enterprise level, I think they're going to finally like push that along, where because companies just don't like to spend a lot of extra money on stuff, and they say, hey, look, you just need to learn how to do this. It's your job. It's 2024. Get with it, right? Same thing goes with the publicist, right? This one can be a little hard for some reason, even though they've got the least amount of work to it, where you kind of say, hey, look, I just need to make sure that when you get those great links that you're getting, you stop sending them all to the homepage. Could you send them right to the one specific page so we get that, that authority right in one place, whatever it is? And the funny thing is if you teach a publicist how to use the tools that we use for link building and stuff like that, for that kind of research, their mind blows up, right? They just kind of go like, wait, we can get all this now? This is like a great service. And a lot of times this stuff is free. We can see where all this stuff is. Yeah, use it. Find all the people you're talking to. Find out all where competitors are doing. Find all this information. They love it once they learn it. You just got to like train them a little bit more to it, and then it becomes part of their job, right? And usually one of the pushbacks that I get on this kind of stuff is that everybody goes like, it goes, why on earth would you have like some copywriter that doesn't have any technical abilities or whatever it is? Why would you want them to suddenly become a technical person? And it goes, and that's not what I'm suggesting, right? I'm not saying that suddenly, that every copywriter suddenly needs to know how to code, right? Or anything like that, or the publicist that suddenly need to know how to code, or that the web developers that suddenly need to know how to start writing, right? They're still going to stay in their lanes, right? It's just that their lanes are going to get their skill sets upgraded, right? To a point to where they suddenly become like, this is now a new modern part of my job, right? And it's the same way that anything changes over the years, right? If you really think about it, at one point, I'm old enough now that I can remember when companies were still going through a computer transition, right? When they were getting like the idea that there were still people in the organization that were fighting the concept of having a computer on their desk at all. Right, that was still happening in the mid 90s when I first started working, and it's so like, but now it's just common, right? Of course you're going to have one. You show up on the first day, where's my laptop, right? like where's this that? But you can't even imagine at the time when that didn't exist. Those skill sets are going to have to do, just like you at one point they all had to learn how to use WordPerfect, and they had to learn how to use email and like that. Their job will require them to learn these skills, right? So even after all that, even after I explain all those types of things to it, I get people that say it will never happen, right? It's just not the way it's going to work. We're not programmed this way. This is not the way like the SEO's mind happened. A lot of times the people that say that are like the hardcore SEOs that basically they're terrified their job is going to go away in this instance. And then that happens, right? But in reality, I would have to almost agree with them, right? If not for the fact that if you just try and force this on an organization, right? If you just go in there and say, hey, look, suddenly everybody learn SEO, like it's your job now, whatever it is, it won't happen, right? It's one of the things where you can't just kind of throw that at people. I've been through that before, back when I first started working in SEO, or first started working as an agency kind of person in organizations. We were doing these large scale audits for these companies and coming in, here's our findings, here's everything you need to know. We'll hang out for a while, help with the implementation, whatever it is. But we also noticed that almost immediately, within like a year or so, suddenly all that knowledge that we dropped off of them just went away, right? And it's some things where people went back to their regular jobs, their regular ways of doing things. It just kind of like evaporates over time if you really don't keep with it, right? And that's why you actually need to know something about change, right? And how it actually works, right? And change happens all the time, right? And the fact that your mindset has to change is really a big concept, right? You really have to understand these things. But specifically, I wanted to give an example around ulcers, right? So believe it or not, up until I think it's about 6 years ago, whatever it is, everything we knew about ulcers, the stomach problem, whatever it is, was that we just thought it was due to stress or other types of things, right? It was one of the things where, like, you used to see a lot of old movies where people go, "Oh, my ulcer," and they'd be walking around with the Pepto or milk of magnesia and stuff like that. And the old movies used to have a lot of guys with ulcers in it. I don't know what it was, but it's funny, they usually worked in advertising. I don't know what the connection was there, but they would you'd see them kind of go like, "Oh, Harry, your ulcer, God, calm down," whatever it is. And it was just a way where it was all about stress, it was all about environment, it was what you ate, all those kinds of things. And in reality, these two guys, Doctors Warren and Marshall, figured out it actually wasn't any of that stuff. It was a bacteria infection. And they ended up actually getting one of the biggest science prizes in the world, for figuring this kind of stuff out. That now you can actually cure an ulcer with a course of antibiotics. Right, you can actually just kill off this bacteria infection, and then your ulcer goes away and your stomach heals, because that's what it was. You actually just happen to have the bacteria that was causing the ulcer in the first place, and it just goes away. Right. So, but you can imagine this kind of crazy concept of where up until just a few years ago, we all just believed it like anything else that we thought was just a hardcore fact that ulcers were caused by this. Right. So if the world can now understand the fact that, hey, look, ulcers aren't caused by that, it may not necessarily be the world, the end of the world as we know it. Right. This type of change might not necessarily be so bad for us if you can be an agent of change. Right? If you can be the one that actually brings this change to the organization in the first place, because it's going to happen, right? And if you don't, the change is going to happen anyway, right? And so you don't want to be the one that's on the receiving end of the bad news for this kind of stuff. You want to recreate your role in the organization to be the one that helps make it happen, be the one that causes the revolution within the evolution, right? And the way you can actually do that is through a process called change management, right? Has anybody ever heard this term before, change management? A couple of you, right? It's a big process, right? Consultants love to use it, especially guys from PwC and a bunch of other ones out there. And they go, "Oh, we're going to talk about these types of things," right? But it's something anybody can really learn, right? And what I'm going to talk about today actually comes from the PwC kind of structure for change management. This is the one that kind of fits the best it is. But I certainly didn't invent it. It's something that has actually been around for some time. Larger organizations have kind of figured out that they need to do this kind of stuff. Anytime they're bound to have a massive disruption to the way the organization works, if they basically come in and say, "Hey, look, the world is changing. This is what it is. We can't keep doing this. We have to move in this direction, otherwise it's going to die." Right? And you can see the organizations that actually embraced it versus the ones that did. Does anybody remember the company called Kodak? All right, Kodak is a good example of somebody that really didn't embrace it very well. They kind of half-assed it. They basically went into it with the idea of we can kind of do this. We can start lending our brand out to other places, and that way it becomes like the Kodak digital camera. But they weren't making those, right? They didn't embrace the rest of the technology around it, and now they're just kind of dead, except for their film department for making large-scale movies. That's all that's left of Kodak these days, right? How about Hewlett Packard? Remember that? They used to make copy machines, right? The last time you really saw a large-scale copy machine, it probably wasn't a Hewlett Packard, because they actually didn't keep up the time. They used to have a giant building where I lived in California, that was in El Segundo. It's a massive, massive building. And the sign stayed up there forever, long after that company died. So it was just this big ominous sign that sounded like we were a dead company in the world. And after a while, I guess they owned the building outright, and they just we're just going to keep it empty. And the city came around and said, you guys need to do something with this, man. We can't have this big empty building here. It's your vagrants are going to start living in it. So they made it into an office space for startups and stuff now. It's just the way it works. And that's I think it's the only way that HP makes money anymore is actually like rent, right? So it's kind of a way to do it. But so what is change management? What is it? It's really kind of a series of processes and plans and ways to do this stuff to make sure that your organization not only embraces change, but holds on to it and actually executes this thing along the right lines. And it's pretty interesting to go through once you do it, right? Because change is hard for any size business, right? If you ever been as part of a corporation, which I have multiple times, I remember when I was at Hilton Hotels, we bought a whole other hotel franchise system, whatever it is, that had like the Red Lion and Embassy Suites and a bunch of other ones all at the same time. And they had to merge those two companies together. Both of them were pretty big to start with, and we had to pick everything up. And for some reason, they decided to use all of their HR policies, and instead they just kind of like dropped them in the organization. He goes, oh, by the way, nobody has sick time anymore, and this is the way it was, and it just freaked everybody out. And it's because there was no subtle, nice way to do it. They really didn't follow these processes. But there's plenty of other ones that did, right? Other companies where they've actually embraced these things. I used to like to quote the guy that was running IBM from the 90s until like the mid-aughts, because he just could see a lot of things coming. He knew that the way that personal computers and how computing and things like that were going to work. And he said, look, we have to move this company in a new direction or we're just going to die. Even though we're the one that invented the modern business computer, right? Like we're the ones that actually have to do that. So you kind of have to really do these things, right? And there's all kinds of hurdles that keep this from happening, right? If you've ever tried to do any change at any levels, right? There's like a fatigue from it. If you try and change things too often, things can dry up, things can just get crazy, what it is. They can flounder during the process, transition, things like that. All those changes that you try and put in place, they like, this doesn't work over here. This isn't getting implemented properly over here. This guy quit, because he hated it all, whatever it is. It just has to go. And sometimes the C-suite itself is the one to blame. They can come in and basically said like, hey, the next thing that happened is this buzzword, right? And they basically drop in your organization and they make one glorious speech about it. And then that's all they do, right? That's the last you see of them. And then they come back a year later and go, so how come you guys aren't doing this buzzword? Like that. And it's like, well, you really didn't give us any tools to do it. You didn't do it. So these are those tools, right? On how to make this happen. And don't worry, you're going to get this presentation, so you don't have to like memorize all these things and all that kind of stuff. This is where these slides get a little bit more wordy for the kind of stuff, but I designed it so that you can take it home and read it and actually learn how to do these things from there, right? But the reason that I kind of bring this up, especially with SEO, is SEO is a major shock to the system, if you think about it, right? Especially if you're kind of introducing it to the organization for the first time, or even if it's kind of been kicking around in the cracks for a while time, and you basically said, we got to stop screwing around with this. Like, we really need to dedicate ourselves to this thing if we're going to win this war. And if you're trying to do it, and if you're that person that's holding the torch for this kind of saying, like, if we're going to do it, you've probably experienced this hardcore pushback, right? From people that basically said, like, I don't want to change, right? That's not my job. This isn't the way it works. You're supposed to do that kind of stuff. Why don't you just do it? Right? He goes, and it's not the way it works, especially when you're dealing with a really large company, right? And part of the problem is that for years, right, years and years and years, SEO has always been sold as its own discipline, right? It's been this thing where it's like, mere mortals cannot do this stuff, right? It goes, it takes a special kind of person that has got the special tools to come in and fix these things. Say, look away, why I do this magic in the room, and I'm the only one that does kind of stuff. And it was really, out of job protection. It was really over the fact that you really want to teach anybody else how to do this kind of stuff. But a lot of it was just because it was new, right? But it's not new anymore, right? It's over 25 years old. It has long moved out of its parents' basement and is out in the world and is executing, right? And really, like I kind of mentioned before, SEO is really a combination of marketing and website development and publicity that was repackaged and kind of resold as something new, right? All of the things that you need to do, especially for modern SEO, the stuff that Google really wants you to do in the first place, is stuff that exists already. These roles are already out there. They just need to be told, hey, look, this is your job. This is the way this is supposed to work, right? But the problem is trying to convince that entrenched personnel, that person that's been at the job for like 20 years or even 10 years or even 5 years, that, hey, look, you're going to have to take on something new just to stay relevant. Well, nobody wants to hear that, right? It's a really tough sell. So for SEO to be successful, multiple people have to update their skill sets. It has to be a system-wide change. It has to change the DNA of the company so that the entire organization becomes an SEO machine, basically, to get this happen. So how does this happen? How does it actually work? Like I said, the process that I like was put together by PwC, which is a really large consulting company that comes in and does these kind of stuff. Multiple organizations have got their own kind of flow for change management that exists out there. You can read up about them if you actually just want to go out and study change management. I happen to like this one for what it is, but I did want to make it clear I didn't invent change management. I'm not that old, but it's something that is out there. So how do you get started with this kind of stuff, right? First and foremost, you want to lead with the culture, all right? You want to step in and kind of say, hey, look, and as I mentioned SEO before, like culture is everything, with an organization. It exists there. It's got its own flow. This is the kind of stuff. And if you just kind of kick in the door and kind of say like, I'm here to change everything, whatever, it's like they're going to throw you out, right? You're immediately going to get pushed back. It's the system is going to rise up and reject you like a bad organ, right? So instead of trying to change the culture itself, you want to draw energy from it. You want to learn how that group works, how it works. When I actually take on a new client for this stuff, that is one of the first things I do, right? Is I actually get involved with these things. I actually say, how does this company actually work? How's it set up? How many offices do they have? Where are the resources all over the country? Is it something together? Do they use Agile? Do they not use Agile? Do they use those kind of systems? But I really want to understand, how these people think and feel and operate on a regular basis, right? And from that, you can actually tap into the way that people already think and behave and operate on a day-to-day basis without kind of ripping up that part of it, right? And it's a kind of nice way to do it. So you really want to look for those elements of the culture that are aligned with what you're actually trying to do, those SEO principles that you're trying to instill in the organization, and kind of bring them to the foreground, right? And so things where you can find out which roles exist already, which things are out there, and kind of like say, hey, look, we can actually use these things that exist already, and then augment the ones that don't, right, as a way to get started. So for instance, if you've actually got copywriters, if you've got a content creating team of some sort within the organization, usually sometimes it's called the communication department. Sometimes there actually is just the content department. It really depends on how it works, whatever. But you can really kind of step on because your writing is great. Matter of fact, the fact that you actually are writers first is even better, right? Rather than the other way around. We just need to change how it aligns with people that use search. Right? There's some other tools that can help with these things. And a lot of times if you give those writers those tools in the first place, they'll love you for it because a lot of times it helps get over like the blank page problem or like, where do I even start or which ideas do I come from? That's what our tools are actually really fantastic at is it's coming up with those ideas based on how people are searching already. And you give that to a great writer, they'll just take off, right? They'll be able to just make magic with this kind of stuff, right? Same thing goes to the PR team and said, hey, look, there's these great tools out there that actually tell us all of our competitors for these, when it comes to the web or, where they're at already or how they're getting reviewed or which places they are. And I've found, because I've used both of them, right, that there's tools out there for publicists that have kind of this thing to it, but they're not as good as our tools in SEO, right? Matter of fact, I think the only thing that really needs to happen is our tools need to be like reformatted a little bit so they're not so nerdy, right? It's like, SEMrush is really powerful, Ahrefs is really powerful, whatever it is, but like you look at it, you try and throw that in the lap of like a publicist and they'll freak out. They're going like, oh God, what is this, a stereo instruction? It's not the way it's supposed to work. But if you kind of tell them, look, just only one section of this you need to worry about. This is the only part you really need to touch. Then they'll get better at it and they'll really embrace it, and especially if you give it to the intern. Right? But after that, then you get to start at the top, right? This is kind of like it can be a tough one because a lot of times you're usually, at least as a consultant or an agency or if you're just another like cog in the big wheel of being in the enterprise itself, a lot of times the idea of kind of making it to the top to kind of pitch this idea can be a real struggle, but it's necessary, right? And it's the only way it's going to work if you actually want this system to change all the way down, right? So you actually need to get the C-suite involved. We're talking the CIO, the CFO, the CEO, all this kind of stuff. So they're all made of it. The head of information technology. You need to get marketing, public relations involved in this kind of stuff. So it's going to take a lot. When I did this for Manchester United, when I did it for the Smithsonian and stuff like that, where I was hired by one person in the organization and said, I need meetings with all these people, right? I guess it just has to happen. Otherwise, the system's not going to work. And it was a lot. It took months just to get it sold in the organization, just to make sure that everybody understood it, to make sure it was changing. But it took a while to do it. Yeah.
What are ways today that like you can do, because like there's so much changing, right? So I'm finding like the AI conversation is a great way to engage different people into like, you care about this because you're thinking about our broader AI strategy. Here's like how this plays us taking different roles. Do you have other ideas on like how to get like, those executives like to
get involved in this kind of stuff? So you actually nailed a great one, which is that you brought up AI, right? So that kind of concept is the idea of like, hey, here's the way to get around that. Here's the way for us to embrace this. Here's the way to do it. And you can find those buzzwords out there, right? You can find those hot topics. You can find the things, but usually the C-suite, usually the top are things that were like, they're going to their own conferences, right? They're actually doing this kind of stuff. And you need to be aware of kind of like, they're all being told like, this is the next wave. This is the stuff you need to understand. This is how it's going to work, and tapping into that as well, and tapping into those fears, to those pain points, those things where they've got their own change things that they're worried about and kind of say, like, this is part of the solution, right? This entire thing is part of the solution to it. We've brought up stuff at AI at modern pitches that we've done lately to where it said, hey, look, if you're worried about AI, this is part of the way we can solve this, is to make sure that this organization is prepared for it on multiple levels. But again, you really kind of have to, again, that's why I say start with culture, right? So you can really get an idea of like, well, what are they afraid of already? Like, what do they think is the thing that's going to destroy this company? What's going to knock them down? And with SEO, you can kind of say, hey, look, it is, as you know, as you've been doing SEO long enough, is that a lot of the things that you're asking for change-wise are, technology changes that will lift all boats, right? Not just search engine stuff, right? So there are things that will improve it along the lines, but you can sell it as like a more massive, larger solution to a larger problem, rather than just kind of saying, hey, look, it's just for this one media channel, right? Well, if you do it on that one, you're never going to get the resources. But if you kind of say, hey, look, it's going to fix a lot of things, it's going to dramatically change this. And the other one I've found is the one that is the money thing, right? If you actually come up with the idea of like, we want to save you some money by upgrading your skill sets, by making sure this, that everybody's on board, that the entire organization becomes part of the solution. And that way you don't have to keep hiring, me over and over again to come and clean up your mess every year because you we did it once and then you just, everybody implemented it and then it went away. And then you came back and say, oh, like it sucks again. Like if you can do it from this idea of like, hey, look, if we're all on board and if we're all raising this together, right, you can get them on because they love the money conversation. If you can tell them they can save money, if you can tell them they become more efficient, then they're really into it, right? It seems to work, right? But yeah, and that's this one where it's develop a case for change that every one of them can support kind of together. Sometimes you have to get them in an offsite. I've found that seems to be a really good way to kind of like jump into this stuff. You just say, look, we need to get you all in one room and feed you and basically say, this is the way this is going to have to happen. Or, I've had it plenty of times where I've had to do it a meeting at a time over several months, right? But it's something where ultimately, if you can get them all there and make your pitch and basically say, here's how I'm going to save the world kind of thing, you can do that kind of thing, right? Now, this is the part where a lot of people get really terrified, right? And it's this idea of involving every layer, right? So once you've convinced the top, right, you actually have to take it all the way through the organization, right? Every layer of this kind of things. And usually the problem is you've got like change things. Anytime you're trying to implement it, you basically go, look, I'm just going to tell a few people, right? I really don't want to spook them, right? Like that. And with the hopes that it just kind of like trickles down, right? And we all know how well trickle down anything works. It doesn't, right? So you kind of have to actually lean into it a little bit and say, look, we need to get it all involved. All the departments that are going to be involved with this, all the people that are going to be involved with this, they all get educated at the same time. They all learn these things at the same time, right? And that's where you really have to, again, go back and learn, the input from the content creators, from the website builders, from the PR team on how their daily jobs look, on how their responsibilities really work together, and how the systems works. It's again, if they use Agile, you need to understand that. You need to learn that's when they do make the pitches to it and how it actually works together. If they don't, what other systems are in place to do this? Are they very like checklist driven? Does everybody have like a little checklist on their desk of like, this is the stuff I have to do every time I publish a new piece of the site? These are all the things I need to do as a writer. These are all the things that do it. Like certain organizations just have these things in place. And you need to understand that because you're going to be one of the ones that kind of disrupts that. You're going to be the one that actually gets some new check marks on that list of activities, right? From there, one of the things I've always felt was a really important is making this rational and emotional case together, right? This can sound a little hippy dippy, right? This can kind of sound a little squishy when it comes down to it because you're trying to deal with emotions and things like that. And most of the time you would love it if it was the rational case is the only thing you had to do to basically say, hey, look, this will make us more money as a company, right? Or this will get us more traffic, or this will get us more this, whatever, and trying to sell it from that kind of concept. And, by all accounts, that should work, right? That should be the thing to basically say, look, I'm going to increase revenue by 20% the next year if you let me just finally do what I need to do here, whatever. And some people go like, whatever it is. But if you're trying to get change in this system, if you're trying to get these people to actually like take on new responsibilities, take on things, sometimes you have to like do it on an emotional level and talk about how they're going to grow as a person, right? How they're going to grow in their job responsibilities, right? And again, there's a lot of emotional language that you can use, learning how to talk to different roles on how it actually works. But like I said, don't write for search engines, but write for humans that use search engines, right? Writers love that kind of stuff. I know as a writer, I love that kind of stuff, right? But one of the ones I always love to do is congratulations, you can all now put SEO expert on your resume, right? Your congratulations, you're all part of the system. You worked in it. It's a good, keyword to add to this kind of thing. You're now just part of this system, right? You've learned how to do these things, right? The other way is next to act your way into new thinking, right? And it's one of the things where you really can't just come into the room and make a bunch of bold statements and kind of say like, all right, team, we're doing this. This is the way it works, like that. You really have to lean in at every level, and daily behaviors need to change, right? And they basically need to reflect that imperative change that needs to happen in this organization. You really have to make sure that everybody understands this shit is happening, whether you're not. It's like, and you probably don't want to say like this shit is happening whether you like it or not, right? You really have to get back from the standpoint of like it's happening. It's not going to go away. It's not going to stop if you ignore it. It's just one of the things where like this is where we're going right now. Get on board with us, right? And you have to act it, but you have to be the one that's involved with this. You basically just can't like drop it on their desk and go, hey, I'll get back to you on that. Check in with me in a month, right? You got to do it. You got to be part of the solution that actually fixes this stuff, right? And so, like, you can't just like with the content team, just basically said, hey, start doing keyword research. Is the way it works, right? You have to be the one to educate them. You have to actually do it with them. You have to show them how this works. You have to show how these things evolve. You have to give them good examples. And same thing with the PR team. You have to say, this is the difference, by the way. If you just link to the homepage versus this, that's not as powerful. You have to make them understand how it works, make sure they keep doing it, make sure they use these tools and things like that. And this is, I know as a consultant that does this for these large scale organizations, it's, in our case, we provide that education, right? It's something where we walk in these large organizations and say, hey, look, you just can't tell them how to do it. Like, we're going to have sessions where we're going to have all these day sessions on how to learn how to do these kind of things. So we're going to have all day sessions for the web dev team, for the content creators, for the publicists and things like that on how to make this change happen. And then we're going to keep following up, right? We're on a retainer. We're going to keep coming back in. We're going to check their work. We're going to make sure they do it. We're not going to let it go, basically, is the thing to it. It's not something, again, that you can say, like, here's the memo, execute the memo. That's not going to work. You really have to act your way into this. And you have to engage, right? And this is the other part of that same thing is you as a leader, you really need to engage with every step of this process. If you're the person inside the enterprise itself that's trying to make this change happen, you can't just go like, all right, we'll have a meeting in another 6 months, right? It's like, no, you at least every month, right? If not more, on kind of how these changes are happening. If anybody's stuck, anybody's got questions, how these things kind of work. You need to start, like it was the old phrase of managing by walking around, that kind of stuff. You need to get involved and actually start working with these folks. Otherwise, you're not going to do it. Sometimes you have to lead outside the lines, right? Sometimes you actually have to make these changes in a lot of ways. In my case, it all comes down to a matter of influence, right? And this is, again, if you really learned about the culture, if you learned who's like that, you'll kind of learn who's really in charge in this company, right? It's one of the things where you can always find, like, sure, there's chief people, there's vice presidents, there's people running around to do it like that. But sometimes certain departments, it's actually run by Phyllis, and Phyllis is really the one that's doing it. And Phyllis controls the flow of information. Phyllis is the head rumor monger in the organization. And if you get Phyllis on board, that's the one that can actually do it. And sometimes that's who you have to sell to kind of make this stuff happen, right? And then there's the formal solutions for this kind of stuff. You can make sure that, there are checklists in place. There are educational systems that they watch out to. There are, things where it's part of your bonus system that they've actually hit this as their goals and they've taken the classes and they've gone through it. Those are the more formal things. And the same thing goes with bonuses and other things that are like, hey, you did all these things, go. I better see something that has to do with SEO as part of your review process, right? Because it needs to happen. That's a more formal one. Right, but there's also the informal ones that are out there. Again, the celebrations for making things right. Some of the most powerful solutions out there are very cultural, right? Celebrating the fact that, like, hey, we actually accomplished this. We did it. Here's the pizza party. Here's the big celebration at the end of the year. Here's this. Here's the award, right? Something along those lines. And those are the ones where, again, it makes them feel like they're actually doing things right. And then probably most important is this idea of assessing and adapting. Right. Again, you may lay that plan down, but if you've worked in digital marketing for any sense of time, you know that you're pivoting constantly, right? This is no different, right? Sometimes you have to realize that, like, hey, look, we trained everybody, everybody's got it, this is okay. And nope, it's kind of faltering over here in the publicity department, right? Because we need to figure out another way to actually make sure that this sticks. Same things. Oh, the content writers, they're sure they took the classes, but they're really not doing everything they need to do for this kind of stuff. How can we approach it and make it work? But you kind of have to stay on top of it, and you kind of have to really keep adjusting it. So anyway, wrapping up with all this. Again, I get a lot of ask, like, hey, when's this all going to happen, right? And if you remember the former Vice President Al Gore used to do his thing on the end of the world thanks to climate change and stuff like that, which is, obviously we're watching it happen, right? But it's one of the things where, like, in his original speeches that he gave for this stuff, he thought it was going to happen a little bit faster based on what he saw. And a lot of people have actually given him a lot of shit about that over the years and say, hey, look, you said it was going to, by this point, the world was going to, fall, and we're all going to be underwater, and whatever it is, you must just be wrong, right? And that's why I'm not going to make a bold statement to basically say, like, it's going to happen next year, right? Because I don't know, right? Some organizations, it's happening already, like the ones that I've worked with. I've seen other organizations talk to where they're kind of halfway there. They're in the process of doing this kind of stuff. You're seeing that role just kind of evaporate from the roster already. But it's something where, over time, this is just the way this is going to go. So, like I said, be a part of that change. Make sure that you're part of the ones that actually does it. And anytime people says, like, I still don't believe you, I still want to do it, where Google believes me. Right? John believes me when I made this statement. When I make statements like this all the time, he goes, yeah, that's the way we designed it. That's the way we designed this this algorithm. This is the way this is what we're rewarding, is that you're doing the stuff that you're supposed to be doing already, right? So you can be there already. So that's my point. Thank you. So do we have time for questions? How long?
Next thing is lunch anyway. So we have time to one or two.
So if you've got questions, go ahead. If that was a great question, by the way. So if you've got anything else, whatever it is, I'll be around. You can do it. Yeah.
Imagine similar to, say, like the pay-per-click specialist role, or really you're thinking like SEO is going away, PPC is staying as is.
So believe it or not, I actually think PPC is going to change too. I think it's another one, and that one, if you're using PPC now and you see Performance Max in there, Performance Max is a big gimme. That basically that's the world that Google envisions for how paid search is going to look, is the idea of a black box that you just feed stuff to, and the idea that you're going to need somebody that's constantly babysitting these platforms and stuff, like it was when I first started doing it. I'm going like, that's not their plan. Their plan is for you to just kind of like blindly hand everything over and let the algorithm do it. So I can imagine the idea that having one specialist that do this kind of stuff will probably go away. They'll probably be doing multiple things in the organization, if that role is still keeping him there at all, right? But it just could be like, Google just kind of shows up and I said, we're just going to do it for you. Just give us all the shit, kind of stuff. So, but how that evolves is definitely an interesting pattern. I think that was a very good indicator where it's going to go. But to my point, it's very much like just the role of calling themselves a digital marketer, right? Because I tell a lot of my students these days, it's like, where should I specialize? Where should I go? Should I do SEO for this? And I go, I'd focus more on just becoming a great marketer, right? Of learning the classic parts of marketing, like about media buying, about consumer journeys, about targeting audiences, things like that, the stuff that never goes out of style. And if that's what most of these companies are really going to be looking for, is like, they want marketers that know how to use all these cool things, right? Not necessarily one expert that comes in and is super focused on one things, because I don't know, my friend Ian one time, he said, one trick ponies get shot, right? He goes, because like once your usefulness is gone, they'll just get rid of you, right? So it's like, and I think that's the way the world's working for this kind of stuff. So it's
interesting, Kate, because I think like when I started, there was a term webmaster.
Yeah, me too.
Did everything.
Yeah.
You obviously make the website, you obviously design it. That's not a designer, that's you. And,
yeah.
SEO came, etc. But then I got specialized. Like, whoa, listen, that's a web developer. Actually, that's a front end developer. That's a back end developer.
Yeah.
And it got split up. But now you're almost saying all these things are getting like almost like simplified, maybe.
Yeah. And
so
kind of like,
going,
combined, and it just where it's all kind of one role in the organization, or it's multiple people doing it, or whatever it is, but like they've just got projects they're working on, rather than somebody that's like, this is the one expert that will come in and fix everything that's broken, right? So I think that's going away. But, yeah. Great question, thank you. Anybody else? Cool. I don't want to hold you back from lunch.
Sure you do.